Okay, let's start. Good morning, everybody. I'm Gianluca Reali. I'm here as a member of CNIT. CNIT is a consortium of Italian universities doing research on telecommunications. And the university I come from is the University of Perugia. Both the University of Perugia and CNIT are members of CIRCLE. And well, actually, maybe you don't know where Perugia is located, and not all of you. Perugia is a relatively small city located in the center of Italy. About 200,000 people live there. In spite of this, the university is quite old. If I remember well, it was founded in the year 1308 by Pope Clement V. I hope I remember well. So very, very old university, but in spite of this, I will talk of something more recent. And in my talk, I will talk about molecular communications, how to simulate molecular communications. I will illustrate some procedures, some simulation activities that we have developed in the framework of CIRCLE. This is the result of a collaboration of different institutions, the University of Perugia, CNIT, UPC, Polytechnic University of Barcelona, and also other organizations that have contributed to this activity. And today I will try to give you a global picture of this activity. This is the structure of my presentation. I don't want to go now in close details, but just want to say that the first part of the presentation will focus on the so-called MORCOM-ML, which is a new markup language that we have developed for supporting simulations and experimental activities in CIRCLE, in biological research connected with ICT in some way. This connection is not an easy task. One of the challenges of CIRCLE is to bridge the fields bio-related, let's say, with information and communication technologies. We come from a very different background and try to find a common language and research methodologies is not that simple, and it was a really issue in our research. And the markup language that we have developed is an attempt of helping researchers in doing things together, researchers coming from different environments, have a different background. In the second part of the presentation, I will talk about a simulator that includes the markup language, the MORCOM-ML markup language. And we will see also, if we have enough time, some examples, some snapshots of our simulators in different environments, 3D fusion and behavior of particles in blood vessels. So, just a brief introduction of molecular communications. It is a quite a recent research area. Most of you are already experts of molecular communications, but just to fix some ideas, and I just want to say that the molecular communications is a field contributed by a lot of disciplines. Most of them are bio-related disciplines, but the new entry is ICT, information and communication technology. And the challenge is to set up communication systems in the biological environment by making use of mechanisms that already exist in bio environments, in cells, in blood vessels, in lymph nodes, in neuronal communications, and so on. Everything that already exists in the bodies and biological environments. And the challenge to re-engineer this mechanism in order to transfer information between nanomachines, biological nanomachines. Well, when I started my academic career, I was used to simulate computer networks, scales of meters, kilometers, hundreds of kilometers, very different environment from molecular communications. The order of magnitudes are nanometers, micrometers, millimeters, maybe centimeters. when we simulate things happening in centimeters, for example, of a blood vessels, it's really tough because we have to handle millions and even more particles, their interaction, their elementary interaction. It is a really hard task to be executed by laptops or servers, even well-equipped servers with tens of gigas of RAM and RAM memory and tens of cores. It's not that easy, it takes time. So the computational solutions for accelerating simulations, for doing things fast, is the really challenge for analyzing by means of simulations molecular communication systems. Well, in the first part in the first period of SYRCL, we analyzed the existing molecular communication simulators. Before SYRCL, we can say that molecular communication is a research area that started in Alan, I think 2010, something like that. And so 10 years, about 10 years before SYRCL, of research has produced some simulators. We have analyzed the existing simulators. The BEANS2 is the simulator developed by 7 years of work at the University of Perugia, also a number of simulators, and CSIM, it is the simulator developed at the UPC in Barcelona. We have analyzed all these simulators by referring to customization capabilities, licensing policy, the specific purpose of the simulator, user interface, implementation techniques, and deployment capabilities. And after this analysis, we realized that we had to do something for harmonizing all these simulators, and not only for the purpose of simulating and analyzing system, but also with the purpose for driving experimental activities, and also what experimental activities. So we did a major effort for developing a new markup language. The markup language that we have developed inspires to some already used markup languages in different environments. It is XML-based because all these languages are XML-based. We have some examples here of other markup languages already defined and currently used for research in different research areas. For example, SBML, which stands for System Biology Markup Language. It is a de facto standard today for illustrating biological processes, and it is very widely used. It is XML-based. All of them are XML-based. CellML is another XML-based markup language used for illustrating mathematical structure of biological processes. NeuromML, same thing for neuronal research. And MathML, another markup language specifically targeted to for the specification of mathematical formulas, relations. And these markup languages are potential input for the markup language we have developed, the molecular communication markup language. I will show then some examples. I will illustrate the code that shows how these languages are imported in MolCommML. Well, this picture summarizes the rule that we have defined for the MolCommML. Well, this markup language has the purpose of setting up simulations in different simulators. Why? Because the problem that we have observed by using different simulators is to compare results, to convince people that results that you produce can be verified by using other tools. Do you hear properly my voice? Comparing results and verifying results is the basic approach that should be used when you do research activity, because verification of results is something that allows you to show that what you propose is actually true and actually implementable. So the MolCommML will drive, still drives, but also will drive by using other additional simulators, the simulation activities for the simulators that I have shown so far. It imports some information from SBML and MathML, and in the future also other markup languages. It should drive some experimental results in order to combine the research results obtained by simulation with the research results obtained by experimental activities, also web activities, through a standard representation of results. And this is the global picture that we pursue for our activity. Well, just to fix ideas, I represent here a very simple and straightforward communication system at the nanoscales in a biological environment. You can just see some block here, some boxes that anticipate the names that we will see later on in the structure of MolCommML. For example, the compartment. We call compartment the environment that include all the machines that interact and implement the communication system. So this is an element that we'll see again in the description of MolCommML. For example, a compartment could be characterized by a given shape, for instance, a cube. We have to assign a measure, to define a measure from the compartment. Also, the compartment can be organized in a nested manner, because, for instance, if you want to simulate how a blood vessel splits in different branches, you need a lot of compartments. Network elements are transmitter, receiver, the so-called carriers. These carriers are, for example, proteins or ions or everything that propagates and brings information from the transmitter to the receiver. We will see communication interfaces. These communication interfaces allow transmitter to release carriers and allow receivers to receive carriers through the so-called receptors, biological receptors in cells. All these elements have to be organized in a specific network topology. So we have to place in the compartment, given positions, the network elements with specific coordinates system and with a specific orientation. This is very important. Protocol stack, all the operations are organized in different layers, similarly as it happens in regular networks, let's say regular networks, electrical or optical networks. So we will see some functions, for example, how the symbols, binary symbols, are represented through these carriers and how these entities interact with each other. So elementary mechanisms that allow these elements to interact. So these rules are part of abstract layers that are specified in Molcom ML. So this is the general environment. So we will give a closer look to these elements to specify, clearly the channel. Channel is another important part. Channel could be, for instance, a diffusive channel or a channel with including a drift, as it happens in blood vessels. So a lot of situations could happen, as should be described by using this markup language. Please don't be scared by this picture. This is just a general overview. This is the UML diagram of the markup language. The only information I want to give you by using this picture that we have two general areas, the red, pink one. It is the part dedicated to mathematical relations. Here we import some information from MathML and SBML. And this part is not the core of Molcom ML. This is the part that we use to coordinate Molcom ML with other markup languages. This part is highly connected with this other part. This is the core of Molcom ML. I will go in some details in this part, in the next slides. The only thing I want to say is that these two parts are very highly related. We have in reality, a lot of arcs connecting this element with these other elements. For the neatness of the figure, we have not shown all the connection, otherwise it could be not readable. Okay, now we focus on this part of the diagram because I want to show you how we have structured this tool and how it works. Here I have highlighted the parts I want to focus on. I would like to describe this way, but I have to be close to the microphones because we are recording, so I try to do my best for illustrating what's going on. Maybe I can read some here. Okay, let's start with an important part, network element here. The network element is the core of the markup language. Network element, let me recall, with network elements are transmitter, receiver, and also other elements. Network elements can be specified in terms of transmitter, receiver, signal. We talk of signal by referring to carriers. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, it works much better. So it's my style. I prefer to indicate directly on the picture. So network element, the network element can specify in transmitter or receiver, as I mentioned before. We have also signals, so the carriers that bring information from the transmitter to the receiver, and also passive elements. Passive elements are elements that don't have a clear role in the information transmission, but interact with all other elements. For example, white blood cell in blood vessel could be passive elements if we are analyzing the communication between platelets and endothelium. So this is a typical simulation that we have executed a lot of times. So the simulation, the communication happening between platelets and endothelium. In the blood vessels, we have also red blood cell, white blood cells that hits with all the other elements in the communication elements, but they have a passive role. So we have also specified this kind of elements. Network topology, as I mentioned before, it is necessary to place the network elements in the simulated environment. Oh, by the way, all what I'm saying is illustrated in the next slides, but if I show these slides, nobody can track the UML diagram, so it's much better that now I try to illustrate this way, and then, if you like, you can read all this description of the UML blocks. So let's proceed as I started before. So network topology, network element, network topology. In the network topology, in this block, in this class, we illustrate how elements are located in the simulated environment in compartments. Compartments are associated with a shape. So compartments can be of could be cylinders, could be spheres, and also a flat circular shape. And the flat circular shape is used, for example, to model receptors on the surface of a cell. Again, compartments, look at this. Compartments can be also defined in a nested manner. So we could have some elements nested within other elements and other elements again. And this procedure is very useful for accelerating the simulation. I will show you later on in the presentation how it is managed. Each compartment is associated with an interaction rule. It means collisions. When particles hit each other, they have to produce a result, and this result is described in this element. I cannot read. Event handler, is that right? Okay, event handler. Here we implement all the rules look at this. This event handler is connected with the pink part that is not shown here. So the event handler implements the mathematical rules that are part of the compartment simulation. Gate, the gate element describes how elements are exchanged between compartments of the simulator. Each compartment is also associated with channel behavior. So all the possible behaviors that can be found here. So each compartment includes a channel behavior, and again, what's missing? It's strange. I cannot. Can you read this from your position? I don't think so. Maybe I read from my slide. Okay. Communication interface. So we have the communication interface. The communication interface represents the receptors, how receiver can receive carriers and how carriers are released by transmitters. We can see here the communication interface could be either virtual or some, I cannot read, virtual or segment, no, Luca? Single element. It's difficult to read. This means that on the surface of our receiver, we can specify individual receptors that receive carriers in this way, and the surface of the receptor could be a kind of an absorbing surface. It is a different way of simulating the reception strategy. Why? Because in some type of simulation, it is important to analyze the behavior of each individual receptor. In other situations, when we have a lot of reception processes happening, it is preferable to speed up the operations, to consider the surface of the receiver as an absorbing surface, and when a carrier hits this surface, it is automatically absorbed. So here you can find the detailed description of all these elements. I will not show them again because, okay, maybe it is worth to say something again on the protocol stack. Because in the protocol step, essentially we have defined two protocol layers, the equivalent of the physical layer in the OSI model, and the equivalent of the second layer, the layer 2. Later on, I will show the code of the markup language, and in the code, I will show how these two layers are illustrated and are used, actually used in the simulation events. Okay, let's go back to the picture we have started from, and now I will show the elements of the markup language, the code elements. So remember, I will show the elements of a protocol stack, compartment, network elements, communication interface, channel, and that's it, and network topologies. So let's begin with the network element. Maybe it's a little boring to see the structure of the code, but this is important to really appreciate how the MolCommML works. Here, this is a portion of the markup language which illustrates a receiver node. All the elements are associated with some identifiers. You can easily imagine that. It is a receiver node, type receiver, and it has a spherical shape. Here we defined using the same code, the units of measurement of the radius, which is nanometers in this case, and the value of this radius is 5,000 nanometers. This element is characterized by a mass, in this case picograms, unit picogram, and the value is 100. A time to live, this is a parameter that decreases over time during the simulation. 10 hours. And the type, how the surface behaves. So we have a full surface receiving. It means that we are using this option. So it is a virtual surface, absorbing surface. And then the communication interface. So how elements are received, how carriers are received by the receptor, the receiver node. The receiver node, as I mentioned before, the surface of the receiver is absorbing, type virtual, and we can see here that this element is not enabled to emit carriers, to generate carriers, but it is enabled to receive carriers. And this is just to have an idea of how to model the communication interface of a network element. Compartment. The compartment is the environment that includes all the network elements. Here we are in the top domain, which is an unbounded domain, which having a spherical shape with a radius that is virtually infinite. So it is the universe. This is the universe that includes everything. But in this universal compartment, we can define other compartments, including all the interacting objects. Again, interaction rules. Here, this part is more interesting because we show how elements of the communication channel interact each other. Here we see two rules. We have a global rule used by all the particles except except of specific particles, because the general collision rule is the elastic collision with no energy dissipation. But in case of we consider these three elements, so a transmitter node, a passive node, so a node that interacts with, could hit other nodes, but a node that is not involved in the communication exchange, and for carriers, for these three nodes, we have also specified a transparent collision strategy. A transparent collision strategy that is described in this file, transparent.xml. Oh, we have three XML files there, 1, 2, and 3. These three XML files are imported from MathML. So this is an example of how other markup languages are combined with the Molcom ML that we have defined in Circle. So, collision rule. Again, channel behavior. In this case, the channel is a pure diffusive channel with a particle that propagate through Brownian diffusion with the laws implemented here, described here, Brownian.xml. And again, network topology. Here we can see that the elements of the communication are located here, transmitter and receiver. We have the coordinates of the transmitter and receiver. We don't have any indication about the orientation because the propagation is isotropic. Particles propagate in a symmetric manner around the transmitter node. So we have the coordinates and the units of measurement of both elements, of the coordinates of both elements. Protocol stack, this is a bit more complex. Protocol stack is the core of the networking architecture that illustrates the interaction between the two elements, transmitter and receiver. We have defined, as I mentioned before, two levels. Level 1 equivalent to the physical layer, and level 2 equivalent to the link layer. In the physical layer, we illustrate how the symbols are represented by using carriers. For example, we have the symbol 1, the first type of symbol. The first type of symbol could be a binary 1, associated with a binary 1. It consists of a burst of 500 particles transmitted by the transmitter when a symbol 1 has to be transmitted. The duration of the symbol here is 0. It means that the carrier, the burst, is immediately transmitted when a symbol has to be transmitted. The other symbol, the symbol 2, it is the binary 0. The binary 0 is transmitted without no transmission, 0 bursts. So when a binary 0 has to be transmitted, the transmitter doesn't do anything. It doesn't transmit any bursts, and the duration is infinite, clearly. Conventionally, it means that the transmitter doesn't have to do anything. So at level 1, we have the description of the two symbols. At level 2, we describe an example of interaction rule. in this case, it means here we can see that the sequence of symbols is just one symbol, symbol 1, just an example. If we specify this sequence in this way, this is a comment, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, it means that sequentially we transmit this sequence of binary symbols represented in these two ways. Then I will show a simulation that we visually we will appreciate this behavior, the behavior of the transmission of a number of consecutive symbols. And this is a general view of Malcolm-ML, how this markup language can be integrated in existing simulators. Well, the most straightforward approach is to implement a parser that extracts the parameters of the markup language and use the result of the parsing operation to configure the simulator, a simulator. Long-term integration, that is the approach that we used in BEANS 2, and shortly in other simulators, is to integrate the Malcolm-ML in the simulators so as the parameters that we specify in the Malcolm-ML can be used directly for executing simulations. Just a figure to show that the Malcolm-ML can be used also for driving experimental activities in a wet lab wet lab experiments. So from the Malcolm-ML, we can specify all the needed information for configuring lab experiments, and experiments are executed, are analyzed, and in a circular way, we can make this circular operation coordinated with the simulation activities so as to proceed in parallel. This is the bridge that I mentioned before that should allow ICT people to interact with bio-researchers. And we have made some examples, some collaboration examples with the medical department of University of Perugia that executed some experiments that we used in our, the result of them have been used in our simulator for validating the simulation results. Now, just the summary of the Malcolm-ML. A markup language, XML-based, used for sharing model between different simulators and between simulation activities and experimental activities. One of the objectives is to guarantee reproducibility and cross-validation of research results and to allow different models to be useful beyond the typical lifetime. And we hope that we have achieved this objective. We are pretty confident that Malcolm-ML will be useful for a lot of simulation activities. Now, I would like to show how, once the Malcolm-ML is used to configure a simulation, this simulation can be actually be implemented by using a real simulation. So we move from the description phase to the implementation phase. So now in the rest of my presentation, we show you how the environment that I have illustrated so far can be actually implemented by using this simulator, BEANS 2, which is a simulator implemented in Java. The main feature of this simulator is to implement, not just to describe, but to implement nanomachine biological models channel models, nanomachine mobility models, and the physical interaction between these elements. This is a tool easily customizable, and it can simulate elementary interactions between biological elements. We have used this simulator for this simulation activities, health monitoring, drug delivery, interaction between organs and tissues, but again also for analyzing the immune response system, to analyze the interaction rules that govern the communication between biological entities. So in seven years of activities, a lot of things have been simulated. Now, this simulator is organized in time steps, discrete time steps, and each time steps include 5-6 phases. The first phase for each time step is the trigger phase. During this phase, all the objects having a time to live greater than 0 is wakened up. All the entities become ready to do something according to their internal status. The most important component of the simulator, of this circular time step, is the motion phase. So according to the motion strategies, all the particles have to move. Clearly, the particle moves according to the motion strategies. And after elementary movement, the particles could collide. Keep in mind that we handle typically millions or billions of particles for each time step. So this phase is the phase of collision check is really time consuming, and one of the research results that we have pursued is to find a good algorithm for speeding up this phase, the phase of check collision. Once collisions have been detected, they have to be managed, and we have the phase of resolve collisions. After all these checks and after all the collisions have been resolved, maybe some elements have to be deleted because, for instance, their time to live has expired, or some elements are moved or exited the compartment, so we don't have to consider them anymore. So we have to polish in some way the simulator, and once this phase has been executed, the information that have been specified in the Markov language are exported, are saved in a local database, and can be analyzed for any further activities. So this is the organization of the simulation. Well, again, UML, you know, but if you want to understand how a simulator works, we have also to deal. But in this case, I used a different approach. Instead of highlighting a specific element, I have prepared some more focused picture just to show how the most important elements interact each other. So this is a portion of the global UML diagram that I've shown before. Here, well, this class, the manager class, is the most important class of the simulator because it is the class that orchestrates the behavior of all the other elements. This is the class that implements and orchestrates all these phases for each time step. So the manager class is the global harmonizing class of the simulator. It is associated with an output strategy. The output strategy includes the elements that must be saved for each time step. And we also have a visual 3D engine. This part of the simulator is used just for debugging purposes because, as you can imagine, it is very, very computationally expensive. It is useful. When you set up a simulation, it is useful to see what's going on in the simulator, have a visual, having a visual feedback of how particles move and interact. But once you are quite sure, pretty sure, that everything is simulated well, you can remove this entity from the simulator. But then, at the end of the presentation, I will show something just to show that the simulator actually works. Well, the simulation domain is implemented by using an abstract class, abstract domain, and from this abstract domain we instantiate the nano-objects that are part of the simulation that exchange information. But before that, it is important to consider that for each abstract domain, we have a mobility model. A mobility model could be, for instance, a laminar flow in a blood vessel, or a more difficult mobility model, or Brownian motion. So for each domain, we have a specific motion strategy. But if domains are nested within each other, for each nested domain, we can have an independent mobility model. For instance, if we want to simulate what happens in a blood vessel is a domain, but the tissue around the blood vessel is another domain with a different mobility strategy. Each abstract domain is associated with a living object observer. These observers keeps track of nano-objects which are put in relation by using receptors and carrier observer. Another important detail. Each nano-object, if needed, includes a mobility strategy, independent mobility strategy. This is the place where independent motion propulsion systems, such as flagella in bacteria, can be used for allowing objects to move independently of these general mobility models. Yes, please?
Sorry to interrupt. Quick question.
Yeah.
If you have interaction between discrete random walks and continuum flow, do you do the interaction between these multi-scale movements?
Well, actually, when I say interaction, I mean when a particle gets in touch with another particle, how the resulting velocity pattern can be computed, right? And we can have elastic collision, inelastic collision, and other things that I will show in the following of the presentation. Have I answered your question?
Partly. So how do you do transitions? For example, you have a hormone signal that's flowing through your blood. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You have a hormone signal that's flowing through your blood, but then it gets dragged back into the cell boundaries, and then it goes from some continuum flow back to random walk. How do you do these transitions?
Yes, I will show you in the following of the presentation. I will show you in details.
Okay. Sorry, I'll leave that to you.
Just,
okay.
How the particles interact with the boundaries of the domains and the relevant outcome.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt.
In a few minutes, I guess, I'll try to answer your question in more detail.
Okay.
So, we were here. Okay. Here, in this, maybe, I hope not to be late. Here, I detail a little bit more how receptors are implemented. Here, okay, let's start from the nano-object class. Let me recall that the nano-object class inherits from the abstract domain. Now, from the nano-object class, we can specify node object and carrier objects. Node objects, transmitter node, receiver node. These nodes can be described in different nested abstract levels. We can go in deep details in defining transmitter and receivers. For examples, we can use objects also for instantiating individual receptors in nodes, while it's much simpler to implement the carrier objects because they are illustrated by changing just their type. So from this class, we have the general features, the shape, which is spherical, their coordinates, radius, mass, velocity, motion strategies, and these are the general feature of an object. Here, the node objects, we can specify surface receptors, carrier selection, carrier emission, carrier reception, processing information, and internal states. So we can go in deep detail here in these nodes. Just an example. In this situation, we have two transmitting nodes and one receiving node. This transmitter transmits carriers of type A, and this node transmits a carrier. I should have a pointer somewhere. Oh, here, I'm messy. Okay. Here, this receptor emits carriers of type B, and this receptor, this receiver node, implements both receptors of type A and type B. In case of a receptors hits with a carrier of the same type, the carrier is internalized, is absorbed. Otherwise, we have just a hit and a collision to be handled as a general collision. So this is a typical scenario that can be simulated by using the simulator, but not the only one. Maybe this is an excessive detail for this presentation. I guess we can move on. Okay. Another important detail. Let's talk a little bit about domains. This is the general class that implements the simulation domain. All the simulations must include a root domain. The root domain is the universe. It's the universe that includes all other domains. The universe is associated with the manager, the global manager that orchestrates all the other phases. And once we have a root domain, we can build up the simulation domain by instantiating other domains in a nested manner. So other domains, each domain has a shape, and the abstract domain is associated with a mobility model and living object observers. And the mobility model includes collision handling, and the living object observers has to deal with all the nano-objects that can interact each other. Okay. And this is an example. We have a mobility model, a many-to-one relation with the collisions, many-to-one relation. So the mobility model can handle a collection of possible collisions. In this example, we show also the cardinality, because it is just to show this example. If we have a collision, the collision could be specified as a collision between particles or a collision between a particle and a domain. This, in part, is answer your question before. That this is the first step of the answer. So we can have a collision between nano-objects and a collision between a nano-object and a domain, the boundary of the domain. In case a collision between nano-objects happen, we need two objects to collide. And if the collision is between a nano-object and the boundary of the domain, we have clearly one domain and one nano-object. So this is the logic governing the behavior of collision handling. So this is an example of the root domain, the universe, level 0. Then we have the level 1 domain. It is a cylinder. Each domain has its own coordinate system. Its own coordinate system. We have a cylinder. Within the cylinder, another cylinder. And within this cylinder, a cube. So, and I repeat, each domain has its own coordinate system. And all the objects within a domain are managed independently of each other, of what happens in other domains. So if there is an object in this domain, this object has coordinates in this system, and it is managed within this domain. If the object exits the domain, it is represented in the coordinate system of the other domain. In this way, we can represent different situations that could be analyzed in a biological environment, a situation like this one. So we have the universe that is the tissue that includes the blood vessel, a blood vessel that splits in different branches. So we have one domain, another one, and another one. And they can be simulated independently of each other. And if we have a good computing machine, we can implement different domains by using different computing cores and proceed in parallel so as to accelerate the overall simulation. But I jumped too many slides. I have to go back a little bit. Now, let's give a closer look to collisions. Let's give a closer look to collisions. As I mentioned before, we can have two types of a collision. A collision between two nanoparticles, and a collision between a nanoparticle and the boundary of the domain. This situation splits in two other situations, because the nanoparticle could be out of the domain, and he could hit the external surface of the domain, or the nanoparticle could be within the domain and hit the internal boundary of the domain. We have different strategies for managing these situations. The different strategies have the objective of accelerating the simulation process, because if we proceed by using brute force, the brute force approach, the complexity of the problem of handling collisions is square n. It is very expensive. So we have to find something more direct, more intelligent than the brute force. Now, the idea is to check collisions only for objects that are close to each other. It is straightforward for a human, but not for a computer system. So we have to, our objective that we reached, that we got, is to pass from a square n complexity to an n log n complexity. And let me explain how we did it. Okay, I will illustrate the approach by using a two-dimension space. The extension to 3D environments is straightforward. Now, assume that we want to simulate this environment and we want to check potential collision between objects in this area. The first step is to find a potential collision. So it is a coarse approach just to verify that a necessary condition for a collision to happen is verified. And the necessary condition for a collision to happen is that all objects have a distance from the origin that is more or less the same. It is just a necessary condition, not a sufficient condition, because if these two objects are located here and here, they are at a distance more or less the same, but they don't hit each other. So, but only considering this necessary condition, a lot of possible combinations can be eliminated from the simulator, and the performance again is really impressive when carriers are not very close to each other. So the first step for checking collisions is to transform this bidimensional or three-dimensional problem, if we use 3 dimensions, in a single monodimensional problem. We just represent here the distance of all these elements from a reference point, for example, the origin of the axis. And we begin from the farthest objects to compare the distance of all these elements. We begin from the farthest objects because the first step of our approach is to order all these elements according to their distance from the origin. We use the heap sort algorithm, and the implementation that we used provides a collection with, on top of that, we have the object at the farthest distance, higher distance. So in this case, we just compare each object. For instance, we begin with this reference object. We compare this, and so on, moving in this direction. And we check if they could collide. Here, the index I represents this object, and the index J represents this other one. This point is di, where d is the distance of the center of this object, and ri is the radius. So di minus ri is this point. If this point is lower than dj plus rj, it means that a collision could happen. And we save this combination, this pair, somewhere in the simulator, in the memory. Then J becomes this particle again, this one, and we proceed in this direction until we don't find any collision. Since this point, we can discard all the other objects. They will not for sure collide with the node I. And proceeding in this way, we find all the possible pairs that could generate a collision. In this case, FC, CD, DA, and BE. So we have isolated 4 potential collisions, and the performance again is that we can check just 8 collisions instead of 15. We have a gain of about 46%. It is much lower than 15. H is much lower than 15. So this is the first step for managing collision in a more intelligent way. Now we have to refine. Good. We have identified the possible collisions, not actual collisions. Now, this phase, not important, these comparisons can be implemented also in parallel. We can separate, we can subdivide the number of objects, the overall collection, once it is ordered, it has been ordered in a number of sub-collections, and this comparison can be organized in different different branches of the algorithm. The first portion of the collection is handled. We can see the comparison that I've shown in the previous slide. The first part of the collection is analyzed here, the second, the third, and the last one. If we have n computing cores in our microprocessor, we can implement n parallel branches and speed up the simulation, the coarse collision check. And this is just a table showing the actual gain. Let's just compare the brute force approach, having 1,000, 5,000, until 50,000 objects, with the total checks that we implement in our simulator, and the gain is actually impressive. We have 10 up to 9, and we have 10 up to 5. So the performance gain is it seems to be really good. Once potential collisions have been identified, it is important to check if these potential collisions are actual collisions. And for each pair, we compare the distance between the centers of the particles. I compare this distance with the sum of the respective radiuses, and if a collision happens, the resulting velocity vector has to be determined. I don't want to go deep in the mathematics. In any case, these relations are very, very simple. They are just the elementary equations governing the collision of two spheres, considering their masses, respective masses, and this coefficient. This is a very important coefficient, ED. This is the restitution coefficient. It is the coefficient that determines if the collision is elastic, perfectly elastic or not. If this collision is 1, it means that the collision is elastic. If it is 0, it is totally inelastic. All the energy is dissipated in the heat, and the number between 0 and 1 means that just a portion of the energy is dissipated in the impact. Then it's just a vector combination of the velocity vectors in order to determine the resulting velocity vectors after collision. Here we decomposed the original velocity vector we decompose these vectors into direction. One direction is the one connecting the two centers of the particles, and the other direction is the direction orthogonal to the previous one. And here you can see that these components remain unchanged, while the components in this direction, the direction connected the two centers, are reversed, and we determine this way the resulting velocity for the particles that actually hit each other. Now, let's go back to this picture that I have shown before. I want just to add in this slide is that if we have a total of n objects, and we have a number of capital D domains, in this case 1, the universe, 2, 3, 4 domains, we have a number of objects in the average, in the best case, in each individual domain, which is capital M, n over D. In this case, the n log n problems that we have obtained before translates in m log m times d domains. And if we have a sufficient number of computing cores, at least d in the machine, we have a simulation time which have a complexity actually of m log m. So we started with the square n, and we resorted to m log m. It is a quite impressive result, because it means that instead of executing a simulation in 1 month, you can execute a simulation in a few days. So it makes the difference. Now, yes, please. No, it's not constant. Well, it depends on how many computing resources you have in your lab. If you have a bunch of computing cores, M in this case, M depends on how many domains you have to simulate, clearly. So M equals N depends on N and D. D is the number of domains.
My question was actually a little bit different. So can I specify the number of signals using a rate parameter, for example?
Number of signals?
Yeah, these nano-objects, rather than saying I have 1,000 nano-objects which diffuse.
All the objects present in the overall environment.
Can I represent the production of those signals, those nano-objects, using a rate parameter as well?
Excuse me, but I have not understood your question. Could you
For example, every 10 seconds I have 1,000 signals coming into the
new carriers, so new objects entering.
So that's possible. Okay, that's fine. That was my question. Okay.
And so?
Okay, that was my question. I just tried to understand whether it was possible.
Is it possible for other objects to enter the simulations?
Yeah.
Yes, if this is a blood vessel, you could have in this direction maybe a number of objects entering, and other objects moving between domains, and other objects exiting the simulation.
So for the new object, is it possible to specify a relative location rather than assuming they would come from one place? Can I say I have X number of objects being produced with this rate, and they always appear here, and then they start diffusion? Is this possible as well?
I have not understood, I'm sorry, but I have not understood the point.
Okay, maybe I can try to ask after the tutorial, but I'm just trying to understand.
But I'm curious.
My question is, would it be possible to say X number of these signals produced at this rate, and they are always positioned at this exact compartment? And they may start diffusion later on.
Yes, it is possible, for sure. It is possible. And it is possible using the Molcom ML to specify the individual coordinates of all the objects, the process in which they show up, and how they move. Their movement is determined by the simulation, of course. But what you say is actually possible, of course. And here the point is that having a sufficient number of cores, of computing cores, it is possible to speed up the simulation considerably because of the M log M complexity is order of magnitudes lower than square n, and also n log n. Now, this is a different problem. The problem of handling collision between nano-objects and domain boundaries. For handling this problem, we used an approach similar to other approaches used in video games. Each domain is enclosed within a sphere. And once we replace each domain with a surrounding sphere, we can check a collision between particles and the sphere. This is just to manage a collision between carriers and the external boundaries of domains. And once we have represented each domain with a bounding sphere, the problem is similar to the one that we have handled, we have solved so far. So once we have this representation, we can consider just the big spheres, the enclosing spheres, and the spheres representing the nanoparticles, and using exactly the same approach that we have seen so far, we can determine potential collision. Once we have determined the potential collision, we can refine again the collision check. Okay, this is all these steps. We have all these steps just to check all potential collision are virtually the same we have seen so far. Now, once we have collected all the possible pairs of elements that collide each other, we can refine the collision check. Now the approach clearly depends on the shape of the domains that we are using, because the accurate check of collision is not the same if we consider a cylinder or a sphere or whatever. So I will illustrate the procedure by using a cylindric domain, cylinder. Here we have two problems. Evaluate the collision when it happens with the above surface, with the orthogonal cut of the cylinder, and when a collision happens with the side surface, with the top surface and the side surface. So in this case, if we want to manage the collision with the top surface, we build up a coordinate system in which the d hat axis corresponds with the axis of the cylinder. The n hat axis is an axis that forms a plane with this axis, the hat d axis that includes the particle, and the O hat axis is the orthogonal axis that exits from the slide. And then we use the coordinates of the object just to check if the object, in this case, collides with the top surface. A same approach is used for evaluating the collision with the side surface, exactly the same approach. And if the collision happens, now it is necessary to evaluate the resulting velocity vector after the collision. So this is the top view of the cylinder. In the top view, you have to imagine the velocity vector before the collision that exits the slides. The two components in the n hat and O hat remains unchanged after the collision because the velocity vector changes its signs just in the normal component, in the component normal to the top surface. So we split the velocity vectors in over three axes. We project the vector over three axes, and these two components remains unchanged. This one and this one, the normal one and tangent one, remain unchanged, while the normal component changes its sign in the d direction, and the same behavior can be observed if we consider the plane made by d hat and n hat. Again, the normal component changes its direction. And same thing can be done by considering the side surface. Here we have a particle that hits the side surface, and the tangent component of the velocity remains unchanged, while the normal component changes the directions. Clearly, the tangent components remain unchanged, and also the tangent components represented in the plane made of d hat and n hat. So it is straightforward, but it's worth to mention. So this is a summary of the performance gain strategy that we have implemented. At the end of the game, we can achieve an M log M complexity, but maybe it is not sufficiently good for the simulation. An additional gain can be achieved by implementing the octree strategy. The octree is a data representation model that divides the simulated compartment, the simulated domain, in octants, in 8 elements for each split. Here the approach is straightforward. It's quite clear from the figure. Just want to specify that T stands for top, B stands for bottom, and the other letters are the cardinal points: northwest, northeast, southeast, and southwest, and same before. So, if the number of particles within a domain is so high that M log M is a complexity that cannot be handled in a reasonable time, we can resort to the octree please do not confuse this approach with the grid computing, because the octree is implemented within the same machine and within the same Java virtual machine, so all the objects that are managed in this structure can reside in the same memory space, and it is quite easy to move objects between one cube and another cube, so it is not very time-consuming. So at the end of the game, if we replicate the octree different times, for instance, in this scheme, maybe this plot represents a region in which there is a high concentration of particles, we can repeat the octree several times until in each individual block we have a sufficient small number of particles, so as the M log M is a complexity that can be handled quite easily. So it is clear now that for each split we generate 8 subdomains. So the number of leaf nodes for each split increments by 7. So if we want to analyze in close details these elements using, for instance, 1, 0, 1, and 2 in 3 splits, 3 octree splits, we have a number of leaf nodes, and within each leaf nodes we have a complexity of M log M, with M sufficiently small. And if we can use a number of cores, independent cores, that can handle individually each leaf nodes, the simulation can speed up considerably. So this is what I have illustrated in this view graph, in this slide. So for each split, we add 7 leaf nodes. So in total, we have a number of leaf node L, 1 plus 7 times S, number of splits. And this way, the resulting M log M complexity is relevant to each individual leaf generated by the octree splits. And this way, the performance can really improve. Here there is a summary of the computational cost of the simulation, of the simulator. We have represented here for handling 1 million of objects, 0 splits, till 100 splits, and at the end of the game, using the brute force approach, the total complexity is 5 times 10 up to 11, and if we use the octree with all the 100 splits, we resort to 3.15, 10 up to 6. So it is a a considerable gain. This is the number of total checks, which includes all the operations for the coarse evaluation of collisions and the actual and the refined evaluation of collisions. So everything is included here. And the performance gain seems to be really, really good. This is a graph representing what I said before. This is the brute force, the complexity of brute force approach, and this is the complexity that we resorted, considering all the contributions. So it is the same information we have seen in the table. I just want to say that we have also made an attempt by using grid computing. We had the idea of splitting the simulation using an approach similar to the octree. So we have organized the overall environment in different cubes, and we have assigned each individual cube to different machines, different physical machines. But we did not obtain very good results, because in this case, the objects reside in different Java virtual machines. They don't have, they cannot easily access the reference to the objects in other machines. So when objects move and when objects collide, it is necessary to synchronize the operation of all the domains, and it is very time-consuming. Here, the synchronization contribution to the overall simulation time tends to be overwhelming. So in this case, unfortunately, the performance that we obtain are not that good. So we, 2 years ago, we decided not to go on with this approach because it is not actually convenient. I want to end my presentation by showing an instance, a visual instance of the simulation, just for a few seconds, because let's see, before starting, the markup language. So, well, I just want to show here just a few values that can have an impact on the simulation. Value 500, it means that for each symbol we release 500 particles. And value 0.5 is the duration of each symbol, and units is seconds. And in case we emit a symbol 1, if we emit a symbol 0, we don't emit anything. So value is 0. For a binary 0, we don't emit any particle. And I want to just to show you the sequence of symbols that will be emitted if I find them in a polynomial time. No. Okay, we have the coordinates here of transmitter and receiver, and maybe we have here. Let me check. Well, I don't find it, but if I remember well, the sequence should be 1, 0, 1, 1. It is present somewhere here, but no, not yet. Please be patient. Okay, I have not found, no problem, but believe me, it's a 1, 0, 1, 1. Let me start the simulation. We have to wait 1 second before, oops, sorry. I would like to show everything. You can see here the time elapsing. We have, after 1 second, we had the release of 500 carriers that propagate in this environment, and the duration is half seconds, the duration of each symbol. Okay, you can see the elapsed time is 1.15, and at 1:50, a symbol of 0 will be emitted. It means nothing. Nothing should happen. But after another half second, we will see the emission of another burst, and these particles are absorbed because this surface has been configured in the Molcom ML as an absorbing surface. It's just a choice to speed up the simulation. Now we are at 1.35. The initial part of the simulation is a bit slower because particles are close to each other and potential collisions are a high number. So the number of comparisons is very, very high. But when they get distance, now, and using also the octree, the simulation speeds up. Release of carrier 0, 0. Now we are at time 1.5, so we don't see anything. We have to wait another half seconds, simulated half seconds to see another burst of carriers. 1.6, 65. So we have just one domain, the universe.
Could you zoom in to the transmitter node, because from here we can see the experience.
No, I can try.
Okay.
1.8, just and okay, 2 seconds. So this is the second burst, and if we wait another half second, we will see another burst. Here you can also appreciate the inter-symbol interference at the receiver, because while the new burst gets close to the receiver, we have also carriers released before, already existing from the previous burst. And this is not a realistic simulation, just to show that the Molcom ML can be used actually to configure beans too. And Now the simulation is lower because we have many particles close each other, so the collision check takes time. Let's proceed till 2.5. Then I will show you another simulation image for video for a blood vessel. Two 15. .2. Clear, the propagation of particles can be modeled by modifying the viscosity of the model, and all the mathematical relations that illustrate the Brownian motion are included in the Morcom ML. So 2.25. We have accelerated the behavior of particles just to speed up the video.
Are you assuming homogeneous particles in this case?
In this case, yes, it is a very simple simulation. We can make it more complicated.
Because visually they seem a little bit different in shapes and.
No, they are spheres. They are spheres.
Okay.
And the visualization of particles, of carriers, has been exaggerated. It is not in the same scale, okay? Because otherwise it could be impossible to visualize them. So we have enlarged enormously the carriers. And my laptop is not exactly a computing server, so I have configured the simulation so that the computing resources from my laptop could execute something visible. Just 2:45, and we should be close to the next release. Okay, another one, and it goes on. This is the performance. This is the operation of BEANS2 for this simple environment. We can stop here the simulation because it's quite boring at this stage. I just want to show you what happened in a blood vessel. Here you see the snapshot of it is not realistic because using the computing resource of my laptop, we have configured a very small number of red blood cells. This is a red blood cells. We have platelets and white blood cells that propagate through these blood vessels. We can also change the view. See the arriving one. But this is useful. Okay, the yellow one, it is a circulating tumor cell in our purposes, and just one because hopefully there are few in the blood vessels. But the detection of these guys is an important research area. And so not realistic, but if you have a sufficient number of computing cores and sufficient quantity of memory, it is possible to realize quite complex scenarios at the end of the game. So,
how much effort did you put in the rendering? Because it's difficult, really.
quantitative answer is a lot of. So you can use this visualization just for debugging, because it is not feasible to execute these procedures during the normal simulations. But if you want to know exactly how many computing resources are used, I ask Luca to answer. Luca is the main implementer of this tool.
I think that at least the half of the resources of the machine will be dedicated to the three-dimensional view. So it is better to shut down the three-dimensional environment for a realistic simulation.
And we have also problem with the memory of the machine, because each sphere, each element in the simulation environment consume a large amount of memory, because we have also texture and a three-dimensional shape. So that's one.
So, any other questions? No? Well, so thank you very much for your attention. And okay, I did my best to show how this tool works actually. Yeah.
Can I ask a small question? So not about the visualization and things like that, but you mentioned that you have discrete time of checking collisions and all these kind of things. But did you? So if you look at your simulation, there's always a discussion between synchronous and asynchronous updating of this kind of system. So I'm assuming this is fully synchronous, or am I wrong in my assumption here?
Excuse me, could you?
Are you doing in this discrete time cycle that you have?
Yeah.
You either update every particle in your system at the same time, or you have an asynchronous updating where if you're updating in every time step, but not always the same ones. So how is this configured here? Is this an asynchronous case?
Luca can answer this detail better than myself.
Let's go back.
You know, how the... Okay,
Yeah,
please
it is
go on.
a synchronous simulation. Each particle has been updated at the same time, because the time step is discrete in the simulation framework. So each event happens at the same time.
So, but this then always raises the question from biologists. They always say like, this is wrong because biology is asynchronous, not synchronous. So how do you fit that in this kind of system? If you want to convince a biologist to use this kind of, or a medical doctor to use this kind of simulations to understand better the systems, how can you convince them that this approach is the better one than looking at an asynchronous updating system?
We have to use a very small time step in order to reproduce a real biological scenario. And this is one of the issue of the simulation process, because the smaller is the time step, and the higher is the time to simulate the biological times, such as, I mean, minutes, hours, but also days. And this is very time consuming for the simulation framework.
And during the operations, a lot of information is saved in a local database that can be analyzed in batch, and just to recover all the information that is inside the kind of data science approach for extracting information from everything happens there. Yeah.
Okay, hello. I have, I guess, a similar question also regarding time step. So you've shown like there are different like flow profiles, like turbulent flow and so on. So what do you do first? Do you like first do the diffusion step and then you make the flow, or how do you make this?
No, the problem of time determining the time stamp. Just a moment. I want to find the. Okay, in order to determine the suitable time step, what is important is that the the product of the velocity vectors times the timestamp should be such that this overlapping region is not too large. Because for the simulation to be realistic, it is necessary that this overlapping is very small, so that the relevant velocity vectors that are computed are actually realistic. Because if you allow these two guys to overlap significantly before determining the resulting velocity vectors, the result does not represent properly the real operation. So the velocity and time step are closely related to each other. So flow and time step are two quantities that must be considered together, not independently.
Okay, I see. And how do you model like more complicated interactions? So, for example, when, I don't know, molecules hit the boundary or something, maybe they change the boundary, or they change themselves. So there can not only be like elastic collisions.
In different domains, we have different mobility models, different collision strategies. So organizing the overall simulation environment in different domains give you, for each additional domain, you have an additional degree of freedom for determining the actual behavior that could happen in the real environment.
Okay, and then one more question.
Yeah.
So right now it seems like because you first described this new markup language,
yeah.
So now it seems like it's useful for this kind of simulator. Have you also like transferred it to other simulators? Because I think every molecular communications group has like its own simulator. Have you already convinced some to use this?
That's the problem. Yes, yes, yes. And this is the problem we tried to tackle. First of all, we inspired by the activity performed in similar research areas, and we analyzed in deep details SBML, SBOL, and all the other markup languages that I have shown so far. We tried to incorporate this markup language in our markup language. We added what is necessary for representing a simulation or an experimental activity in the Molcom environment. Then once we agreed on the general structure of markup languages, we have started to implement parsers, not only parsers, but also the integration of the markup language within simulators. This is a process that will last a bit, maybe, but I guess it is important if you want to compare results and if you want to replicate research results and to demonstrate to other researchers that it happens frequently in the area of molecular communication that research results consist of simulation results. The difficult thing is to verify that these simulation results are results that can really are representative of a real biological environment. Our attempt is to standardize. Let's say standard is a big word. Okay, let's try to define a reference so as to allow researchers to compare their individual results. That's the approach that we pursued in Circle.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Please.
Do you see any potential that you can use your software also for parameter estimation? So you run the simulation now with somehow guesstimated parameters. Could you also connect them to experiments, do some kind of parameter estimation?
During the simulation, we, according to the output strategy that we specified in the markup language, we save a bunch of parameters in a log file. So during the execution, after weeks of execution, we have a really huge file storing all details of the phenomenon that you want to analyze. After that, We have other tools for analyzing these log files and find the information that is actually needed. Sometimes a lot of data are really needed to find very specific behavior, and it is a part of the mathematical tools and processing tools that we use daily for our research activity. But that's the approach exactly.
And what happens when 3 particles collide at once?
Well, the probability that 3 particles collide is actually 0. But in discrete timestamps it could happen. But if I'm not wrong, please Luca support me. We consider the sequence of a particle that hits first with the closest one, because there is this area that is a tolerance that should be close enough for making simulation realistic. It could happen that the overlapping of 3 particles exists, and in this case we evaluate the greatest one for ending first, the hit by 2 particles, and then the third one. You first.
Sorry, I want to begin on the answer you gave concerning the markup language. So in systems biology, they use the SBML a lot, and so it's like you say, it's almost like a de facto standard. So, yeah. so I guess in your markup language, there are things which are not present in SBML. So have you been able to talk to these people and convince them to integrate certain things that you require for this kind of simulations in this more standard?
This process is in progress. So we have taken contact with these people, and this is one of the achievements of the Circle project. The communication is active, and we hope that we can find a common ground for exchanging information. Because the first approach we had is to incorporate other achievements, other configuration files, other things, and at the end of the game we will propose to exchange.
Yeah, because the objectives are different for SBML than for you, so yeah.
Yes. We have addressed the specific things of molecular communication, so we hope that these things are of interest also for other research communities. That's fine. No other questions? Good. So it's lunchtime, I guess, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Gianluca, for a very interesting tutorial. We're going to serve lunch in this room, so it's at the back here. There's soup and there's sandwiches, and there's fluids as well if you want to rehydrate, and also if you want to get some fresh daylight, there's outside the room as well. So we meet back here at 2 o'clock to start the technical sessions. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.